Okay, hello everyone. This is a webinar about global supply chain management to introduce you a supply chain minor here at University of California, San Diego. And let's see, we have a few students joining. So let's just give a few more seconds so that everybody has a time to join. And just as a courtesy, if you can actually turn on your video, that will also help a lot for the presenters, for me and for Chris. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Jenny. Again, if you can turn on your video, that will be great. Thank you, Julia. Thank you, Devin. Thank you, Gino. Thank you, Chris. Okay, thank you, Luca. With that, let's get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Shin. I'm a faculty member at Rady School of Management. In this session, we will introduce you guys about supply chain, what is the global supply chain, why it is important, and also we will end up discussing with one example of supply chain, and then I will also introduce you a few things about supply chain minor here at Rady School. Okay, with that, I already tell a little bit about myself. I joined UC San Diego in 2012, so it's been about a decade, 10 years. And I do research in forecasting and supply chains and operations. And I also teach operations and supply chain, in particular also supply chain analytics. So before joining UC San Diego, I taught Northwestern University, Kellogg School of Management. And before that, I did my graduate study at Stanford. And today, actually, Chris will talk a lot about the business aspect of the supply chain. Chris has over 35 years of executive and consulting experience in global supply chains and operations, as well as technology and innovation. He's also a former member of Defense Business Board, which actually provided the secretary and the government about the business role of supply chains. Currently, he's a member of supply chain board of the Global Funds, which actually try to accelerate the ends of AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria as epidemics. And the Global Fund is also supported by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And he's also currently a strategic advisor to many Fortune 500 companies. With that, Chris also has been teaching us right here at Rady with supply chain classes and operations classes, as well as a few other classes. With that, I'll pass it to Chris. Chris?
Thank you, Dr. Shin. And thanks for the quick intro. I do appreciate that. And yes, just to carry on what Dr. Shin talked about, I teach at Rady and I teach supply chain and work with Dr. Shin, even though I'm not on the full-time faculty, in developing the entire supply chain curriculum to make it very relevant to industry. So today, I'd like to introduce our agenda to you. We have 6 major points. First, given the fact that most of you are engineering students, we'd like to introduce you to the supply chain. What is the supply chain? The end-to-end supply chain and its importance. Because we come out of industry, we come out of business, we'll discuss some key issues of the day. We'll talk about the impacts of these issues on engineering and the supply chain and the new normal. Mainly, we'll go and say why knowledge of the supply chain is essential for you and all engineering students in their careers. Then Dr. Shin will talk about an example in retailing and talk about how you can register for classes and the minor. Now, a little bit about me and engineering. I have run engineering groups. I've run global supply chains where engineering has been a critical part of it. So I know the importance of engineering to the supply chain and vice versa, and why the knowledge of both is critical to rise in the executive ranks. Okay? So let's start off by defining the supply chain. And you may ask, why do we do that? Well, we do that because not very many people, including business executives, always define it the same way. But to set a baseline, what is it? It's the flow, deployment, and management of products and components. Just hit the next one, Dr. Shin. Commodities, supplies, spares, equipment, in fact, pretty much done everything, including service, information, cash, taxes, and people. And it's the flow of these across, you can just go on further, across multiple channels, retail outlets, delivery points, segments, geographies, trade zones, from the point of first supply to the end customer and back, across the entire product and technology and customer life cycles. And essentially, it's to achieve best-in-class and sustained revenue growth, cost margins, cash-to-cash conversion, return on assets, customer satisfaction, risk minimization, and shareholder value. Most important, it is the most important and in-demand business function in today's global, uncertain, e-commerce, technology, and customer-driven business environment. So what we're going to talk with you today is about the supply chain, about all these aspects of it very briefly, and the role engineering plays in the supply chain, vice versa, and how you can benefit from supply chain management. Next one, Dr. Chin, go forward. So let's start off with what I'm sure all of you are most interested in, which is shareholder value. Why? Because many of you will join companies. Some will join it in engineering and design. Some will join companies in management and general management. Many of you will want to start companies or join small companies. As a result, shareholder value is incredibly important to you. The next one. It involves total cost minimization, tax minimization, profitable growth, fixed capital optimization, working capital efficiency, and customer service levels to drive enterprise market value and the shareholder value. All of these are direct results from the supply chain. And as every executive knows, you have different levers to manage all of these to try and drive up shareholder value. As you move on from engineering, pure design, to general management, to management of business units, you will have to be familiar with these issues. But don't take my word for it that supply chain is, so important to everybody. Let me give you some other examples. So please, Dr. Shin. It's critical. And a few quotes there. Our former president, taking action to ensure the safety of our nation's food supply chain. He said, we're working very hard to make sure our food supply chain is sound and plentiful. Okay, it comes from the president. The vice chairman of Limited Brands says, you don't understand the importance of supply chain management to your business? I'd love to compete with you. My old boss, Michael Dell, says, why am I focused on the supply chain? Simple. It's a barometer of my business. Okay. And then Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, talked about the supply chain in terms of problems in the workforce supply chain. Tim Cook, as you probably know, headed the supply chain for Apple before he became CEO. And then finally, the one that I really like, this supply chain stuff is really tricky, from Elon Musk. So supply chain is important. Let's start off and talk about the end-to-end supply chain. Be prepared for a complex slide. Lots of colors, but it says something. We start off with the business model and concept. Products, markets, and what you do in engineering, target costs. We then go to R&D engineering, product development, and product design. This is where it starts. Defining the business model and designing the product, which is what you do. Then we start the supply chain from the point of first supply. If you look at my little iPhone here, from the point of first supply, the people who make the case, the glass, the chips, all of that, through different sets of suppliers, going on to the next step, logistics providers, manufacturing CM. So all these go to somebody like Foxconn, who makes it, who then sends it on to the customer in fulfillment cycles, to the fulfillment DCs, again through multiple different modes of transportation, all the way to you, the end customer. Okay, and then it comes back. Okay, so that's the entire supply chain, from the point of first supply to the end consumer and back. And we have a supply piece and a customer space. And what flows back and forth across this? It's information, cash, costs and taxes, people, and product. So everything that mainly flows in a company goes through the supply chain. And a lot of it's driven by engineering, starting off with new product introduction, and then the design, target cost, materials and components, and what we in business call DFX, which is a term that if you want to move away from pure design and engineering into management of the business, you will have to learn and get familiar with. DFX means, very simply, design for everything. Design for logistics, design for packaging, design for transportation, design for manufacture, design for service, design for use. And I'm sure you learn all that in your classes, but this is where we address it specifically. It's what business is about. Okay? Now, the supply chain is an integrated system, and it's integrated across the entire product and life cycle. Supply, finance, marketing, product management, engineering and product development, and the integrated supply chain across the entire product and life cycle, service life cycles. So there's no one piece that can stand on its own. Supply chain cannot exist without engineering and product design, and vice versa. Okay. So next slide. So that's what supply chain is about. So let me set a little context. What's happened over the past year? Lots and lots and lots of things. Coronavirus, the Suez Canal blockage, the new US administration with potentially higher corporate taxes, Brexit, belligerence of China and vice versa, national industrial policies. Customers and consumers are morphing with buying patterns, and so on. Lots of different things have happened. Rising costs, fractured supply chain and supply disruptions, and a whole lot of other things. You know, for those of you who are not old enough to remember the old Batman show on TV, this comes from there. Holy global risk happenings. So many things have happened over the past year in supply chain management and business, which has led to a new normal, the next normal, today's business imperatives. And you'll see a lot of this has to do with engineering, reduction in complexity, risk management and mitigation, including supplier location and redundancy, national security considerations. I run across a lot of this in my role in the Defense Business Board. Reshoring, nearshoring, locating closer to markets, the life cycle approach, the fact that globalization is gone. It's now international and cross-border. And something that has never come up in the past in board of directors meetings, supply assurance, making sure that supply is assured. So in this context, you can go on, Dr. Shin. Let's look at engineering and product development. What you do is much more than understanding technology, development, and engineering a product. It's much more. It's about designing and engineering a business product and solution and setting the foundation for product, cost, and supply chain strategy. And when you couple it with a knowledge of global and end-to-end supply chain, it's about you starting your own business, you executing a business model, you rising through the managerial ranks, you running a business unit, or you running a company, all of that. Okay. So engineering plus that helps. Now, so what do you do in engineering to drive business success? You're all familiar with the two little graphics on the right, different versions of engineering process design, right? What does that drive? It drives design for manufacturing, logistics, packaging, and service. It drives target costing. That's what you do. Modular design, approved vendor lists, common components, and life extension, commonality across products, and new technology applications. So in addition to just designing a product, if you understand the supply chain, you will look at engineering from this point of view, designing products for business and the supply chain. Let's take an example, very simple example, trite almost. This little iPhone that I have in front of me. It is designed for manufacturing because they make millions, has to be done quickly. It's designed for logistics. Note, nothing protruding. Can be flat, designed, put in place, all that. Okay. Glass is slightly recessed, no breakage. Designed for packaging and designed for service. Before it even started life, the design engineers came up with a target cost. Now, this does not have modular design, this is an integrated design, but others do, and so on. So this is the critical issue around supply chain management. And further, Dr. Shin, and to achieve this, you need to understand the end-to-end supply chain, business, and financial impacts. Next slide. And this is what I want to just point out to you before we close. Engineering is an activity. Supply chain is an activity, set of activities. What's important? What's important is the link to the company financials. Engineering to supply chain to the balance sheet. So these are the engineering decisions based on supply chain knowledge that you make. Move on, Dr. Shin. These drive all the business benefits we talk about. So everything you design is not just because it's cool or because it's technologically advanced. It's because you want fast time to market, lower costs, lower shipping costs, reduce excess and obsolescence, lower material costs, fewer supplier failures, all of these things, it drives that. And it results in 5 things: increased profits, improved working capital, lower costs and margins, increased revenues, and improved product costs and process costs. It is a field that impacts and is impacted by all engineering disciplines. And it is essential for business success, rise in managerial ranks, starting a business, driving a small business, and across all industries, including, as I found out, the Department of Defense and global health. I work also with the Global Forum for Health Issues across the world, work with supply chain management, and the engineers responsible for designing the products. This is all about engineering and the supply chain. So we'll be around, and I'll hand it over to Dr. Shin now, but we'll be around to talk and answer any questions. Send either of us an email if you want to know anything about this. Just to tell you, it is the conduit, the valley, the tube for rising in managerial ranks and having business success. Okay. And it goes well with engineering product development. And at this point, I'll hand it over to Dr. Shin. Dr. Shin?
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. First of all, everyone, if you can turn on your video, that'll be really helpful for us, for me and Chris. And also, if you have any questions, please feel free to stop us anytime. Just unmute yourself and then talk, okay? And before I talk about a few, one specific example about the retailing, I just want to share one example of why and how supply chain or managing suppliers can be so critical, okay? First of all, one way to define the supply chain is, broadly speaking, everything in between your great ideas and money or values or impact, anything in between, that belongs to supply chain. If you want to implement your great ideas into money, into impact, that's what you need to know about the supply chain, okay? With that, let me give you one specific example. This is the case about iPod Nano with the little a music player from Apple. At that time, Steve Jobs was the CEO and Tim Cook was the COO. And if maybe you will you remember this sort of a legal dispute between Apple and Samsung about their iPhones, right? I don't know what's so special about the size of the buttons or the curvatures, but hey, that's what Apple claimed that belongs to them, to Apple, right? However, if you think about iPod Nano, that small, sleek little thing, it's much simpler to copy, right? It's not as complicated as iPhone. It's literally just a flash memory, and then you have a code for, a little jack for your earphone, and that's it. However, when it first came in 2006, right, the fall of 2005, from 2005 for the next 5 years, from 2009, for those 5 years, nobody in the world could not copy that. There's nothing about the patent. It's just nobody couldn't copy that. Why so? Right? It is such a simple product. And why for 5 years? And believe me, if you have a little, there's nothing special about iPod Nano. And in the world, competition will come and be brutally copy that product if they can, right? That was not the technology, that was not the aesthetics of Apple that prevented anyone to copy that. It was actually Tim Cook's brilliance. Okay? Here is what Tim Cook did. When Steve Jobs first came with that idea, Tim Cook approached its suppliers about flash memories like Samsung's and Hynix. And then Tim Cook prepaid Samsung, prepaid Hynix over $1 billion. And they said, hey, I know this iPod Nano will be a big thing. I know it will generate tons of cash. What I will do, here, take my cash, take my $1 billion, and for the next 5 years, whatever flash memory you have, it's ours. That's what he did. And for the next 5 years, now that's just a legend. That's the history, right? People saw the huge increase in demand. Everyone was trying to, hey, let me do that. Let me also make that little flash memory and a little poke a hole there for the earphone, and that's it. But nobody in the world from 2005 to 9 could not get any teeny bit of a flash memory. It's all pre-bought, pre-purchased by Apple, and that was it. That was it. You don't need patents. You don't need legal lawsuits. That's about it. That's about the power of supply chain. If you know that, hey, let me manage my suppliers, even to the level of prepaying money to them, to purchase, to preoccupy all those capacities of flash memories, that gives you the money. That gives you the monopoly power for the next 5 years for Apple. That's one example of the power of supply chain. And with that, let me also give you another example of the supply chain, which for sure everyone knows, which is the retailing. Okay. For the retailing, let me give you a little bit of a history. Okay. So if you think about the retailing, initially it's 1895. It started with the little push cart, right? Here, one thing that I want to emphasize is, first of all, those push carts, they are small and they come to the customers. They cannot put too many things. They will put some things that they know that they will sell, and then they will push those carts close to customers, and customers will come and buy. Okay, that's the beginning of the retailing. And then in 1912, there was one company for the concept of a store, right? And this store, what happened was, this was actually the Great Atlantic and Pacific Tea Company. They sold the teas and soaps and things like that. And for them, the key is actually they were 100% vertically integrated, right? They made teas and all those things that they sell, and they ship it to their stores and they sell it. Oh, by the way, Devin, you asked a question, say they partnered, the Apple partnered with their suppliers to have exclusive flash drives. Indeed, they did, right? They did. And also they cemented that partnership. What Tim Cook did was they cemented that partnership by even prepaying. Right? And if you actually talk, I mean, well, at this point, you may not have your suppliers, but once you go and get a job and work in this area, and if you suggest your suppliers, hey, I will prepay you, all the suppliers will say yes. Right? If you say, we will prepay you to get your capacity, all the suppliers will say yes. And that is exactly what happened in Apple's iPad Nano case. So back to this Great Atlantic and Pacific Tea Company. For them, the innovation that they brought was the concept of stores. Right? These stores are still close to customers, right? Not as close as the push cart, but still they are close to customers. However, they are highly specialized, right? They are not selling everything. They are only selling the teas, right? And also they are 100% vertically integrated, meaning they were the suppliers, they were doing their own shipping, and they have their own stores. Now, after Great Atlantic and Pacific Teas, here comes I will say, the greatest innovation in the retailing industry, right? Which is the concept of a supermarket. Right? What a brilliant idea. Okay? And let me tell you a few brilliant ideas that supermarket brought. It's King Kerr. And first of all, unfortunately, they were actually staying away from the customers. Okay? Those big supermarket stores, they were not close to customers. They were away from the customers, pretty much out of nowhere, but in a big store. Right? That's number one innovation, scale. Right? They come with the big scale outside of the residential areas, not in the residential areas, but outside of the residential areas. That's one innovation. Number two, they sell everything. Right now, it's not the case, like Pacific Tea's case, it's not the case that they produce everything to sell. They buy things from their suppliers and sell it to customers. Like they are right in the middle. They were the middleman, but at the same time, they sell everything. Right? Think about the customer's perspective. Customer's perspective, they will come, and once they come to this King Cullen, there's everything. Right? What a great value that they added to customers. You don't have to go through different stores. Just come to King Cullen, and you have everything. Right? That's the second innovation that they brought. And another innovation that they brought, which to me it's very interesting, which is the concept of outsourcing. Now, what do I mean by outsourcing? Before this supermarket, the way that the retail, the way that the stores worked, right? If you actually remember that Pacific Tea Company case, the shopping experience is typically customers will come, and then before coming to the store, they will jot down on what kind of teas that they want to buy, right? They have the list of things that they want to buy. And then they pass that, they give that list to the store agents, and the store agents will then go and pick it up and then give it to the customers, and then customers will then check and then pay. That's the way it used to work. Now, when King Kulon first came, the innovation that they did was, hey, why should we do that work of taking customers' orders and pick something for the customers and deliver it to customers? We don't want to do that work. It's too much of a cost. Now they said, let the customers do their work, right? Instead of we working on picking things up and delivering to customers, customers will come to the store and they'll go and they'll pick their own apples instead of us picking apples for them. Now, if you think about customers' perspective, on the one hand, you don't want to do that. It's a work. It's a work, right? And they're not paying for that. However, Wallace, when they first did that, customers loved it. Customers didn't see that as a work. They actually love to pick their own apples. They actually love to push their carts. What a great experience, right? And now, if you think about supermarkets' perspective, that's great. Now we don't need to hire agents to do all that work. Let the customers do. We save cost. And once we save those costs, we can cut the price, which is then good for the customers with the cheaper price, right? So with that innovation, it brought a win-win situation. Customers love that shopping experience, and supermarkets save the cost and provided cheaper price to customers. Right? That's the last great innovation that they brought, right? Again, for the supermarkets, the first innovation that they brought was the scale, big scale outside of the residential areas. Second, they sell everything, not integrated, but disintegrated, quite standardized everything, right? But disintegrated. And lastly, outsourcing sort of a difficult stuff to customers, but at the same time, the stuff that customers somehow enjoyed it, right? And if you think about that concept of outsourcing it to customers, King Kulon is one example that happened in 1930. But even these days, you see that, right? That concept of outsourcing work to customers, you even see that now. Let me start with this. Think about Starbucks. How many of you have Starbucks apps? Can you raise your hand? Great. I see Maria. I see Gino, I see Jenny, right? And Jake, many of you, right? And Kristen too. Now, think about what Starbucks apps are doing. Is to some extent, it's very similar to supermarkets, which is outsourcing it to customers. Without apps, let's say you come to the store, you have to make an order. And there's got to be an agent who will take your order, key in, and process the payment. That's a work for them. And that agent is not free. Somebody has to pay, and it'll be the customers in the end. Right? Exactly like Maria said, now you are doing it, but at the same time, it's easier, more appealing to buy coffee and be ready to order. It's actually saved the cost on the Starbucks perspective, but customers loved it too. You don't have to go and wait in line. You can actually do it while you are actually walking to Starbucks. And if you go to Starbucks, just pick it up. Customers also loved it. And with that, though, eventually, I hope it will come. Otherwise, at least it will help the shareholders of Starbucks with the increased profit of the Starbucks. but Starbucks will be able to save the cost because they need less agents. So in that sense, again, that's a win-win. Customers loved it, at least some customers loved it. Starbucks loved it too because they saved the cost. And another component of it is, think about all the data that they will collect. You use the app, and they will also try to get you more coffees by giving you all those stars. And today is a double star day, for example. And with that, they know exactly how customers will respond. Previously, some customers come to Starbucks. It's sometimes harder to connect who ordered what on which day. Now with the app, they know exactly. Right? So in terms of drinking coffee goes, I bet, especially if you have an app, Starbucks knows more about your coffee drinking than yourself. Right? That will be another power of Starbucks. Now, Starbucks is not the only example. There is one company that pushed that concept to the extreme. I see some of you have actually, I'm sure maybe you guys are sitting on some furniture or chairs. Where are those chairs coming from? Some chairs, some beds. At least I know some of you bought those furniture from IKEA, exactly like Narek said. Right? That's the extreme concept of outsourcing it to customers. In particular, all the hard stuff, I mean, hard in the sense of this, the stuff that's very easy to save cost with big scale, right? Think about even delivering things, right? You have a IKEA store and things come to IKEA store. When things come to IKEA store, it comes with big scale, right? Because things coming to IKEA store, it'll come through 18-wheelers, those huge trucks. And that delivering cost is expensive, but there's a scale. With the scale, the per unit delivery cost goes down, right? So in that sense, the first sort of a inbound delivery to the IKEA store, that's less costly. However, what is more costly is from the IKEA store to your house. That cannot be done in 18-wheelers. That will be done in a small truck. And with that small truck, there is no economies of scale. There's no scale. Without scale, cost goes up. Now, IKEA said, well, cost goes up and we don't want to do that. So let's outsource it to customers. Right? Customers will do that last mile, right, from the store to your own house delivery. Not only that, for IKEA, even more harder stuff, right? In particular, the assembly. Assembling all those beds and chairs and desks, they don't do that. It's too costly for them. Right? They let the customers do it. Well, at least some customers enjoy it. And with that, it comes with the huge cost savings. And with that, then they will then be able to give a huge price discount to some extent, a cheap, right? A cheap furnitures to customers with the reasonable quality. Another aspect of IKEA, if you think about it, for the furniture, surprisingly, IKEA actually offers a lot of different variety. Right? However, with that kind of different variety, it's not the case that they keep all different kinds of furniture in the store. They do, like Chris said, in terms of design for X, they do a modular design. All the variety is coming from mix and match. So in terms of their raw material, they still do have huge economies of scale. With that, they'll be able to save cost. Still, though, with that modular design, they will be able to provide a lot of variety. Another hard stuff that they do is even for picking things up. That's a lot of work. Picking things up, just like supermarket, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of workforce, which they don't do that, right? They actually outsource it to customers. Now, a lot of this supply chain and operations, it's also tons of attention to details. Okay, let's say if you think about IKEA's, even the facility layout, right? Because again, picking things up is done by the customers, and they also want customers to pick, to some extent, as many things as possible, right? To sell more. Now, when they design their facilities, their stores, even think about the elevators. Have you guys ever recognized something special about elevators in IKEA? Next time when you go to IKEA, check their elevators, right? Typically, IKEA stores, sometimes it's first floor, second floor, but sometimes there's first floor, second floor, and the third floor. If there is first floor, second floor, and the third floor, there is no elevator going from the first floor to the third floor. Right? There's only an elevator from the first floor to the second floor. And if you want to go to the third floor, you have to go through the whole second floor from this end to the other end. And then there will be an elevator from the second floor to the third floor that pushes you to, hey, if you want to go up to the third floor to the restaurant, you have to go through the whole second floor to go there. And by walking through the second floor, you may pick up some other stuff. You may pick up a clock, you may pick up some stuff that you didn't think about, but hey, it's there, and you realize, maybe, why not? Right? So a lot of attention to details also has been put in that facility layouts of IKEA as well, right? But now back to this concept of supermarkets, the key is really attention about outsourcing it to customers. In particular, the very high costly stuff, right? That outsourcing it to customers that then enable them to reduce the cost, which will then enable them to provide cheaper price to customers. So that's the retailing of the past. And now retailing of the present. You see Costco, you see Walmart, you see Whole Foods, right? As I said before, just like supermarkets, one thing everywhere we see is the scale, right? Both Costco, Walmart, and Whole Foods, they come with the scale. Another thing that I want to emphasize is actually each stores, each retailers have their own sort of a markets, right? The target customers that Walmart aims is different from the target customers that Whole Foods aims. That's quite clear, right? Walmart goes with the, let's say, cheaper cost and cheaper price. Whole Foods may go with the fresh or high quality products. One thing interesting is Costco, right? Costco, it's somewhere in between. It's not, the quality is not as high as Whole Foods, but also at the same time, the cost is not as cheap as Walmart. Now, the question is then, typically when you are somewhere in between in business, that's a harder sell, right? If you say, yeah, we are not as good as Whole Foods, but we are not as cheap as Walmart, we are somewhere in between. Walmart will come and eat your lunch. Whole Food will come and eat your dinner, and you have nothing left. So, however, Costco's case, their sort of a targets, their market is not in between, it's special. It's not in between Walmart and Whole Foods. It's something special, right? Which is, for Costco's case, for example, what are the best sellers at Costco? What is their focus? What is their best seller at Costco? So feel free to put in the chat. What do you think is the best selling products in Costco? By the way, one thing special about Costco is this. Both compared to Whole Foods and Walmart, in Costco's case, the number of product variety is much smaller, right? Walmart case, for example, something called a stock keeping units. They keep like 20,000 stock keeping units. Costco's case, they limit their stock keeping units to 5,000. So in terms of number of different products, it's quite limited. So selling more amounts of food in packages, they have that everything with the big scale, with the bulk. Groceries, groceries is actually quite interesting. In Costco's case, if you remember a few years ago, there was none about organic. Now, if you go there, there's quite a bit of an organic, right? So fresh food is actually one thing that's growing in Costco. TV is big, hot dogs, okay, rotisserie chicken, that's a Costa, well-known Costa leader in Costco, large bulk in products, indeed. Membership is something special. So now talk about the membership. Costco's membership means, in terms of Costco's, it's not the case that random people come, right? It's all membership based, which means they know their customers. If you have one Costco store, then that means they know pretty much exactly how many customers that they have based on that membership. Right? Gas is another one. Now, here is one thing. Oh, good. Lucas said toilet paper. Indeed, Costco's case, their best seller is a toilet paper. Now, what's so special about toilet paper, Luca? If you think about it, something very special about toilet paper. What is so special about toilet paper? And let me share this idea too. So whenever I go to Costco, right, sometimes, let's say my wife typically checks what's the price and what is the ingredients in all those boxed foods. What I check is, let's say even for blueberries, I check when the blueberries are picked. They never disclose when they are picked. I don't think they can keep track of that. At least they keep track of when they are packed. And you will be surprised to see Costco blueberries sometimes coming from Chile, packed 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, packed from Chile, and it took only 2 weeks going all the way from Chile to San Diego. It is really fresh. And Narek said it's a commodity, right? Doesn't expire, usually consistent demand. Good, very consistent demand. Right? Toilet papers, think about that. It's not like, hey, like blueberries, for example. That's actually it's not the case that I eat blueberries every day. Right? Some days I will eat more, some days I will eat less. Toilet papers, never the case. You go once a day to a restroom and you will use a toilet paper. If you think about the demand, that's quite stable, which means it is very easy to predict the demand, right? In addition, they also have the membership. So they know exactly how many customers that they have. And they know pretty much those customers, how many toilet papers that they use. Unless you have a diarrhea, the demand is what it is. Which means not only blueberries, but toilet papers, they sell really fresh toilet papers. Next time you buy toilet papers from Costco, smell it. You will smell the fresh toilet papers compared to the same toilet paper in Walmart. Maybe the same toilet paper in Walmart, that might be months old. But the toilet paper in Costco, that's only weeks old, right? Which means in Costco, everything sells fast. They know exactly what is the demand. They will stock it for the weekend and they sell. They will stock it for the next weekend on Thursday and it will sell. They sell really fast. Okay? When you sell fast in supply chain, the key is everything in motion generates money. Things that moves, that generates money. Things that don't move, that generates cost. So what you want is everything moving around, right? Moving around. In Costco, indeed, it is the case. Everything moves fast. It comes and it sells. It comes and it sells. And when they do that, it generates money. The problems of some other stores is it comes and it just sits there, not selling. That's the cost. You don't want that, right? That's another key for Costco, right? Selling really fast. You don't need much of an inventory. You don't need much of an investment to start the business. You invest a little, you sell it fast, you generate cash fast. That's the holy grail of investment, right? Now, with that, let me also tell you another retailing of the present. This is 7-Eleven Japan, right? How many of you actually went to, had an experience to go into 7-Eleven Japan? Anyone? No. Good. Then let me just tell you a little story about 7-Eleven Japan. 7-Eleven Japan's case, one thing very special is this. First of all, it's a convenience store. And at this time, the Olympic is happening in Tokyo, but that's where 7-Eleven Japans are mostly is, right? So lots of 7-Eleven Japans in Tokyo. Now, if you think about Tokyo, the real estate price is extremely expensive, meaning 7-Eleven Japan store is tiny, right? But the key secret of 7-Eleven Japan is in that little tiny store in the city of Tokyo, they keep everything. Now think about that. It's not the case that they have the space as big as a Walmart. They have a little tiny space like your room. They keep everything. Now, how can they do that? They don't have space to keep everything, but somehow, if you go in the morning, there are all those rice balls that you see in the second photo right here, right? In the second photo down. If you go at night, in the evening, you see that all those rice balls are gone. Instead, in that place, there are beers. So the key for them is actually they will replenish, they will deliver things in that tiny little store a few times a day. The stuff that they keep in the morning are completely different from the stuff that they keep in the evening. Right? So by doing so, they will be able to keep everything. The key is they need to know what they will sell. Right? Here again, the data and the information will be key for their success. Another example here, it's actually from my home country in Korea. You can see that my brother is trying to do a shopping for his tomato juice. Now, where do you think he is? Well, he's actually waiting a subway, right? In a subway station. And he was so into shopping that he's not even knowing that he missed the train. So this is one example of a retailing in Korea, which is, if you think about Tesco, this is Tesco Home Plus. Every Tesco Home Plus, they have their own refrigerator and the setups are exactly the same, right? So they put the photo of their refrigerator so that people, when they actually go to work, they can actually open their app and then shop all those, let's say, juices and milks and put them in their app. And that will be then delivered in the evening, right? When they actually go back home, it'll be there in front of their store. Right? Now, that's one example. It's not only on the subway station, also in the bus stops too. Right? Whenever there is a time that people will have time to do nothing, there will be those. Right? Now, if you think about retailing, this is the still retailing of the present. Who's the retailing of the future? Who is the retailing of the future you can think about? I am sure at this point, it's not the future anymore. How do you buy these days? Which company do you use? Online, Amazon, indeed, exactly, right? That's retailing of the future, okay? So with that, I will just pose a question. And if you want to know the answer, you gotta come to our class. And the question is this: if you think about Amazon's business model, it's online delivery, right? If you think about the whole history of the retailing, initially it was coming to customers through the push cart, and starting from the supermarkets, they were away from the customers. Now with the Amazon, they deliver it. They go close to customers as well. Now, what's interesting about Amazon is this. Amazon started their business by delivering things from their gigantic distribution centers, right? I mean, they started selling books initially from their gigantic distribution centers away from the customers, right? And then deliver it. And that was their business model. That's the way that they made money. However, recently, they were doing something awkward, which is, I mean, first of all, they bought Whole Foods. Okay, that's what it is. That might work for their business plan. But even in terms of bookstores, if you go to the UTC Mall, Westfield Mall, what do you see there? You see actually Amazon bookstore. Now think about that. That's interesting because if you think about, in particular, that bookstore industry, right? Initially, there were tons of mom and pop small bookstores. And then it comes with the Borders, it comes with the Barnes and Noble, huge bookstores. When those huge bookstores with the scale, when they came out, all those small mom and pop stores, they're gone. Right? Those big stores, Barnes and Noble and the Borders, they came with the scale and killed them. Now, Barnes and Noble and Borders, they're gone. And that's Amazon who killed them. And Amazon basically said, hey, you guys are talking about the scale. Huh? Let me show you my scale, and that scale of a huge distribution center, right? It's the wall of scales. And you say that huge Barnes and Noble store, let me show you my scale of the distribution center, right? And with that big of a scale, it killed Barnes and Noble. Now what they're doing is something strange. Right? They're now like, instead of big, huge scale of their distribution center, they're making small bookstores in a fancy place with a lot of, I mean, think about the cost of renting those costs. That's expensive. That is expensive. Taking all, placing all the agents in those stores. What are they doing? What are they doing? Isn't that something strange? Why in this wall of scales, all of a sudden they go against the scale? Okay, they created Prime membership, which allows customers to get, so Maria said, to get their items shipped faster than those without it. So people that need items shipped faster will order on Amazon. Good. And just a quick answer. Let me say it this way. It is pretty similar to Costco. Meaning, in Costco's case, the secret was everything sells fast. And in Costco's case, everything sells fast because they know what sells. They only pick the items that demand is very stable and consistent, like toilet papers. That you don't need a brain power to forecast the demand. Right? So that's why everything sells fast in Costco. In Amazon's case, it still sells fast, not because of the product that they pick, right? They pick everything. Still, it sells fast. Why? Because they know everything about you. At this point, it's pretty safe to say they know everything about you on what kind of things you buy, what kind of things you buy when, what kind of things you buy when and where, at what time. With that, with the little store, they know where to put the store and they know what kind of products to put in that little store. And when they put it, they know exactly when it will sell. Right? That is really the power of data. That is really the power of Amazon at this point. Even with the little store, even without the scale, they can actually achieve the scale with the help of the data, right? So with that, let me actually give you some information about Supply Chain Miner. So first of all, there's the webpage in rady.ucsd.edu in Supply Chain Miner, and you can see there is a button on declaring the miner. In terms of, and thank you, Christina, it's in the chat box as well. In terms of declaring, one thing that I will say is there is no commitment in declaring the miner, right? So you can just declare the miner right away now. And for the supply chain, we have the Supply Chain Institute. From the Institute, we have a lot of events just like this. And also we have a lot of industry experts giving webinars and giving mentorships. Just declare the minor now. It's not a commitment. However, once you declare the minor, you will receive all those announcement emails and things like that, and you will be invited to those events. So that's what I highly recommend. Declare the minor. And once you declare the minor, it's up to you. You can, if you take those core classes and the elective classes, you will get the minor. If not, you don't. But at the same time, declaring the minor is not a big deal. There is no commitment. Declaring the minor doesn't mean that you have to do it, okay? So I will say, just test the water, declare the minor, and try a few courses. And that's the last word that I want to leave you with. And if you have any questions, Chris and I will be here for a few more minutes. So feel free to answer any questions. Otherwise, I am looking forward to seeing you. Chris and I are looking forward to seeing you in other events as well. Thank you, guys. Great. I have one question from the phone ending with 283. Can you unmute yourself and then ask question?
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
we can hear you.
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I was just wondering, since you were talking about Costco and how they sell things quite quickly, what happens when they're unable to sell the stock that they have in the store? Do they have manager deals, or what do they do?
Okay, good. That's actually one thing I remember. If you go to Costco, one thing that you will see is this. Every price ends with the last cent is always 9, right? You see $12.99, $16.99. One of my colleagues who actually work at Costco was saying, hey, Shin, if you see any product at Costco, but ending with the price of, instead of 9, either 8 or even 7, let's say instead of $12.99, if you see $12.97, you go ahead and buy it, right? Because he said, sometimes, I mean, in addition to the regular promotion, right? Like let's say toilet papers and others, sometimes it comes with $5 discount and things like that. That's the regular promotion. But in addition to the regular promotion, exactly like you said, if something doesn't sell well, they come with the discount, and that's a different kind of discount, right? It's not a regular promotion. It's basically taking care of the inventories, right? So in that case, they cut the price to sell. Now, one thing though is that actually have a negative impact on that product itself. As I said, in Costco's case, they really limit the stock keeping units. They really limit the number of types, the number of different types of products. Okay, so if that happens, right? If that happens, basically, if you are the supplier who will sell that item, you know that next week Costco will not come back to you. You're out. Right? They will try different items. So that's why typically this is what I say to my students, right? Actually, one time my student who was selling, you will see his product even at Whole Foods too, one of the Rady alum, selling a lettuce, right? But lettuce even with the roots, actually, it's grown through hydroponic, and the whole lettuce is coming even with the roots. Okay, you will see that in Whole Foods. But when he said, "Hey Shin, now my product is selling at Whole Foods," I was okay. Good luck, right? But when he finally made it to Costco, right? That's the point that I said, "Hey, if you need more money, let me know. I'm ready. I'm ready to invest in your company." Because if you sell in Whole Foods, yeah, you sell it. Okay, maybe you sell thousands, but if Costco took your product, that means you sell millions. We are not talking thousands, we are selling millions. And indeed, what he told me afterwards is when he was start selling at Costco, he needed to double his capacity. he cannot catch up with the demand. He needed to double his capacity pretty much everywhere. So that's one thing about Costco, which is, yes, if it doesn't sell well, they will take care of it, either cutting the price or maybe sometimes even just throwing away or just selling it to the discount stores. But with that, the negative downside is once that happens, that product will be out of shelf and the new product will come.
Just to Shin, if I can just add
Please,
the
please.
Costco thing from a different perspective. If Costco doesn't sell their stuff, and they do a lot in terms of philanthropy about it. So, the foods, the fresh foods, if it's not sold by a certain time, but it's still okay, they will give it to food banks. Other products and things like that, if it's a non-returnable thing, because a lot of stuff cannot be returned. It's more expensive to do it. So then they give it away to different, philanthropic societies. So that's how they dispose of it. They're one of the few companies that don't actually put it in the darn trash bin. So that's a good thing for them.
Ah, I see. So since you said that Amazon was also quite similar to Costco, do they have a similar kind of policy when it comes to returns or when to put things on discount, or do they keep things in stock more often?
Well, two things in that. Number one, at its base, Amazon's a distributor. Okay. So if it doesn't sell, the vendor has to take it back. Okay. So at its core, they're a distributor. However, they do have a lot of their own products, which may surprise you. And they do have a lot of sponsored products. And in cases like that, they carry on doing it, they discount it, they put it on special, they do a whole lot of other things. But by and large, they're a distributor. And if you're the vendor selling through them, hey, you don't sell it, you take it back. And by the way, not everything that they don't actually touch everything. They touch a lot, but a lot of stuff is direct drop shipped. Okay. So when we talk about the relationship of engineering to business and supply chain, if you're selling stuff like that through Amazon, you've got to design it for logistics so that it can be easily drop shipped, so that it can be easily stored with the minimum amount of space, because Amazon charges you. Okay, they don't do anything free. So that's why you design it for those things.